රැස් වී දෙන ජීවිතේ.
There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is the current state of affairs in Sri Lanka. Does it beg an answer? We have the answers for you tonight. Joining us via Zoom today are Angelo De Silva, Trihan Munasinghe, Menaka Mayadunna, as well as joining us tonight on Face the Nation as well to express their views and pose questions to the panelists who we've invited today on Face the Nation. Joining us today on the show are Rajiv Amarsurya, former Secretary, Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Centre for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Deepika Udugama, former Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, as well as Attorney at Law Nishan Sydney Premdiratna. Thank you very much, gentlemen and the ladies, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Let's start off tonight's show with Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Centre for Policy Alternatives. Bhavani, interestingly today, the government decided to reshuffle the cabinet because last evening we saw several members of the cabinet first resign and then the entire cabinet resigned and then they appointed 4 members to the cabinet. So today when I visited several protests that were organized in Colombo, most of the protesters were saying the pack has been reshuffled but the jokers remain. What is your take on this?
So thank you, Shamir, for having me on this panel. It's very unprecedented times and also very interesting times in Sri Lanka because we are having these protests across Sri Lanka. It's not just in Colombo. And I think the general sense from at least the placards that you see and the messages is go home Gotabaya, go home Rajapaksa. So there's a clear message coming from the protesters that this government has failed, that they have lost confidence in the president, they have lost confidence in the cabinet, in government. Now, in that confined curfew, thousands came to the streets. It was a civil disobedience that we haven't seen in recent years, that kind of scale. Now, that message is also very clear, and very soon after we saw the resignations of ministers and some state ministers. So there was also at least some recognition from the political leadership that change was needed, and the message from the people was we want to see the government taking note of these calls. Unfortunately, after the resignation there was some anticipation there would be some change. What we got is 4 ministers being appointed today, a reshuffle. Question is, why a reshuffle now? There is an opportunity to look at this moment to bring in change, bring in a different political culture. The president actually reached out, I think, to the opposition and said, let's form a unity government. That was rejected. So it's also very interesting times where people are protesting. There's a lot of energy, it's quite electric, but it seems the president and the prime minister are tone deaf to the calls of the people. So this is going to lead to further crisis if it's not addressed very soon. And I hope it is addressed because we are also in an unprecedented economic crisis. We need leadership, we need a plan, but we're not getting that at the moment.
Bhavan, you're saying that we need leadership, but do the people or does the people expect that leadership to be given by the Rajapaksa family?
Well, from the protests and the calls over the last few days and even a month, I think we need to take note of the fact that these protests started over a month ago. they were very much driven by citizens. This is not political parties driving it. There were political parties who had certain protests, but largely it has been spontaneous protests by the people in response to the economic crisis, to the power cuts, shortages of essential items. And if there's no change, if the government or the leadership doesn't respond in an adequate manner, the worry is how far is this going to go. And we've seen already, I think there are news reports of attacks against particular members of parliament who are formally with the government. So I worry that if there is no proper leadership from the government, from the president, from the prime minister, this is going to go to in another direction. So it's in a way so urgent that they step up and take action now.
When you say step up, does that mean a complete resignation from the Prime Minister as well as the President?
Well, if the President and the Prime Minister resigns, there's also a constitutional issue and there could be a constitutional crisis. So one needs to also look at those dynamics as well. But there is a clear call from the people. So is there I don't see this in terms of from the political leadership taking steps to at least address those concerns. So if ideally the president should quickly come out and communicate. There is also very limited information coming from the government side. Start with communicating, start with explaining what's going to happen. There's complete silence, and this is a government that promised so much but seems to be failing.
Yeah, but even when you speak about communication, we saw the manner in which the President's media division issued a statement on the wee hours of Friday morning when there was a protest launched on Thursday, which clearly says that extremists had carried out the attack. What is all this? What are they trying to do? Again, have a nationalistic rhetoric? Is that what they're trying to do?
So Shamir, I think it's very important to understand where that PR comes from. I mean, in 2018, 2019, soon after the Easter Sunday attacks, this narrative shaped this call for a strong leader. There was ethno-nationalism in those messages that was going out. There was fear that was created among the people. That campaign continues, unfortunately, and this narrative of protesters being extremists is extremely worrying, because we've been protesting for more than a month. We haven't resorted to violence. We are not extremists. We are asking for addressing basic needs. Now, I really do worry when that communication is shaped in a way to target individuals who are using their democratic right. So the communication, as you quite rightly said, is very much, in a way, extremely worrying, because that's not connecting with the people.
But today,
it's targeting people.
But Bhavani, when you look at the people today who are coming to the streets, they've set aside absolutely everything with regard to race, religion, caste, and so on and so forth. If you come to the streets, you would realize, I know that you were also protesting a month ago with regard to there needs to be a change in the country as well, and CPA has been championing this cause for some time. But today, the government will not be able to even find a person to negotiate with, because at the end of the day, it's the entire populace who have gathered to remove this government in power.
So, Shamir, I think there are people on the streets calling for change, but this is a political settlement that is also required. So I think you need to look at it in different ways. Yes, people on the streets, unprecedented, quite electric. I mean, it's quite interesting what's happening on the streets, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there are elected representatives, there's the parliament that's going to be sitting tomorrow, and what are the conversations that's going to happen at that level. Now, that said, I hope the elected representatives and the political leadership are not tone deaf to the calls, and that seems to be the problem here with the government. At least there is complete tone deafness.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives. I now move my attention to Attorney at Law Nishan Premtiratna. Nishan, we saw the manner in which how a cabinet was appointed by the government this morning. We see Dinesh Gunawardena taking oaths as the Minister of Education, Johnston Fernando as the Minister of Highways. I don't know what the minister is going to do with regard to highways when there's a national crisis in the country. Then we have President's Counsel Ali Sabri, the Minister of Finance, and then we have Professor G.L. Paris as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now, I want to drag your attention to the statement that was made by President's Counsel Ali Sabri last evening on his Facebook page. He says, after resigning from his portfolio as the Minister of Finance, he says, "I can sleep with peace of mind that I have always acted true to my conscience and best interest of my beloved motherland." After taking over as the Minister of Finance, can the Minister of Justice now, in your opinion, sleep at night?
Shamir, thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, it's always a pleasure to come and be with all of you all at Face the Nation. Firstly, I do not know the objective of what Mr. Sabri and what he said on his Facebook page. That is beyond me, but the issue at hand is quite serious. As Bhavani pointed out, we are not here at a very easy or very light situation. The country is facing turmoil. We are in a serious situation. Last time, Shamir, when I came here, I think for the Port City deliberation, we were talking on, I was very upbeat because I was very confident that the Port City...
The only person in the panel who was very optimistic about the Port City project.
Yes, because I was there to discuss on the constitutionality of it, the legality of it, and I was also very upbeat that that could actually to our country. But having said that, over a year, there has been clear mismanagement in respect of certain decisions which have been. Now, fundamentally, I see that the issue started in respect of not addressing the dollar issue or the deficit between the remittances and the expenses. The failure of the government to take the decision at the time to go at a certain price and then remit money into Sri Lanka through the black market resulted in a serious deficit.
Nishan, let's get back to that in a minute. But my core question to you was, you've worked very closely with President's Counsel Al Sabri. I know that you've worked with him on many constitutional reforms in Sri Lanka, and you were also in one of the subcommittees appointed by the Ministry of Justice to look into affairs as well. Real positions. I don't know what was the basis in which Johnston Fernando was appointed as the Minister of Highways, but I would like to know from you, what would have been the basis in which President's Counsel Ali Sabri, who is an expert in law, was appointed as the Minister of Finance? Aren't we digging our own grave? Or isn't it the government again trying to pull a fast one with regard to this cabinet reshuffle?
Shamir, it was not only me, it was about 300 lawyers, or there was a lot of lawyers. Mr. Sabri got involved in respect of uplifting and revamping the legal system. So we all worked cohesively to address issues in respect of laws delays and create new pieces of legislature for the betterment of the legal system. So we worked. This was not a job where we got paid. We were all pro bono taken, and we worked for the betterment.
What would have been the basis?
Yes, so coming to your issue, now today morning when I woke up, I think both of us are also Facebook friends, I put a post on my Facebook. I was very concerned about our issue with the IMF. We need to sort out our debt restructuring immediately. Now the IMF meeting is scheduled for, I think, on the 14th of April. That needs to be done. So now, irrespective, we are having turmoil, we are having political uncertainty, economic crisis and all of that. But if we do not address the IMF issue, we are going to become a failed state. And if we default our payment in July, that's going to be quite fatal for Sri Lanka, and it will create probably doomsday for us. So I believe, I don't know, I'm just presuming, the role of the finance minister needs to be set up so that that issue or the negotiations with the IMF can continue. Somebody needs to go there for and behalf of Sri Lanka. So probably Mr. Ali Sabri, being a professional, the president probably trusts him so that he can go and deliberate and he can be advised by people and listen to people.
That's the problem. At peace at night after dropping off and resigning from his cabinet portfolio. But a lot of businessmen, a lot of people, they can't sleep at night because there is no electricity. We are in such a predicament at the moment. This trust factor has really taken us down, don't you think?
Right. Definitely. And I am 200% with you, Shamir, and we have to hold the politicians, everybody, accountable, not merely at the point of exercising our franchise, where we elect them for 5 years, but during continuously, we have to, I think this is the ideal scenario, ideal situation to completely revamp our constitution. And because ultimately, irrespective of who you are and what you have done for this country, people have sent out a very strong message to everybody. You are temporary. If you do not look after the interest of the people, we will ensure that you all are going to be put under pressure. And that is happening. And that is the message from where we should start and probably look at revamping and holding all politicians accountable, Shamir, not merely because here in our constitution, we exercise our franchise, we give a vote, and thereafter we cannot hold them accountable for 5 years. So that's a serious issue.
Right. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Nishan Sydney Premtiratna. I now move my attention to Rajiv Amarasuriya, former Secretary of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Rajiv, I tend to pose a question to you with regard to the law reforms in Sri Lanka and what should be done, but I want to pose a question to you right now. With regard to the 225 members in Parliament, the Bar Association has been very vocal about the current situation in Sri Lanka right now under the leadership of President's Council Salia Peiris. What is your opinion? Do you think people want the 225 members in Parliament at present? Can't we get rid of them and appoint new members where who are held accountable and who can respond to us with regard to what is going on in Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Shamir, and it's nice to be on this program. It's a very interesting question you pose. Seems to be one of the calls by these protesters seeking a change of the status quo. Now, it is very easy for one to say, well, we need to change the 225 and bring in another 225. Now, this is not something which has been articulated in the last 1 month. We have seen people saying this for maybe several of leaders to come in, but unfortunately, our political parties and the political structures have not allowed succession in that way, have not allowed new faces to come in. So, if that is a possibility, if we can, like a magician, say, okay, from tomorrow we will have 225 professionals running this country through Parliament, then well, that could be ideal solution. But we need to be practical.
No, but people don't want these people. I think we'll be probably getting Angelo, Trehan, Menaka, as well as Christopher. Last time we had them on the show, most of the views came in saying that they don't want these politicians. They want people who are professional to run the country. And we are again banking on these 225 members at the end of the day. Why? Why must we do that?
So I think all of us around this room also, if given a choice, we would say we want to change, we want to have the right people there. What I said before also, the structures in our the political parties, the system, as of maybe 1 month back, did not permit let me finish. Did not permit the new faces, the new professionals to come in. It was actually probably impossible for someone, say a professional lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, to say, well, I want to go to Parliament, I'm going to represent the people. But to come through that process, it was impossible. Things seem to be changing. There is a call by the people now that we want a fresh set of faces. Now, as to how that will happen, how that transition will take place, we need to see how it works out, whether there is some way of doing so. The traditional political party, the structures we have up to now did not permit that. I think the last election there were about 60 new members who came in, but again those 60 also have now been branded together with the 225. So whether it will be through the traditional political parties, which would now have to move away from their members or the leaders and look outside, or whether there will be new groups, new forces, new parties coming up with new sets of people.
With your permission, let me rephrase my
Yes.
question, right, Rajiv? Let's say there will be a new prime minister in Sri Lanka. The opposition parties are able to form 113 members in parliament, and they are able to appoint a prime minister by showing of confidence in parliament. If that case be the scenario, do you think there is any member in the opposition who can lead this country?
Well, you have to work within your framework, bottom line. So you have to, unless you go in for election and bring in new members of parliament, we need to work within our constitutional structure. So then you need to find those within the 225. Now we are looking at a transitionary period. We have about 2.5 years left to an election if you go in the normal time period. So then you need to find a group of people within the 225 who can then be placed in these important positions to take the country forward and maybe bring us out of what we are presently in. So and also one must also look at it from this point of view that the dynamics have completely changed. Earlier maybe you could come in, you could be elected, then you forget about your constituency, you do what you want, and then you closer to the election you go back to your voters. But today there is spotlight. Today there is a call to the leaders, to the members of parliament, the ministers. Well, this is not good enough. You have failed. You need to get your act together. So whoever comes into that position, those positions will be under the spotlight, and they would have no choice but to perform and provide those.
So based on what you are saying right now, Rajiv, it seems to us as listeners and as the media, even the opposition right now are being very selfish, because they don't want to come to a common consensus, because they very well know the public are behind them and the public want the president to go. As a result of that, snap elections would be called and they could emerge victorious at the next election, which is a very selfish state of affairs. Don't you think so?
That's one way of looking at it, and we don't know what the thinking is, but there was a statement that the opposition would not, the main opposition would not join a coalition government. I think one must look outside the politics of all this at this juncture. Now we are in a situation of a huge crisis. We are at the crossroads. So during I think 2008 and 2009, when we were coming towards the end of the war, there were several members who joined from the UMP to the government and supported the government. So whatever that modality may be, I think it is imperative that they come together. If they do not, I don't think the people would allow them to continue.
Right. Thanks. Thank you very much, Rajiv Amarsurya, former Secretary of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Fortunately or unfortunately, right now the people are just fed up with all politicians who are in power, and they want the change. I now move attention to Dr. Deepika Uddugama, former Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Deepika, interestingly, you've held the post of former Chair of the Human Rights Commission of the country a few years ago. What is your take with regard to the conduct of the present state of affairs in Sri Lanka, especially in terms of the emergency regulations that were imposed several days ago?
Well, first of all, let me thank you very much for having me on the program. Before we get to emergency regulations, I think we have to ask ourselves why we are in this predicament today. All these political questions can be asked about the type of solutions that can be offered and who can offer it and so on and so forth. But I think what we are seeing today, and what has I don't think this situation necessitates the declaration of a state of emergency, but let's discuss that at later. I think what has come about is a sort of a tipping point, a long-term crisis that was brewing, that has now come to boiling point. Now when people are protesting and saying we're really sick of the political order, etc., I think people are also criticizing themselves, because people, after all, we have been voting for 91 years, since 1931, and so there is a sense that the political fabric, there's something wrong about the manner in which we have also used our democratic rights, because we are the ones who created, in a way, this political culture. We tolerated We acted in a way quite innocently also at times, believing everything that was said over the years, over the decades. Let politicians divide us, give us false promises, did not keep those promises, and it goes on. So now it has come to a point where it's sort of boiled over. And now what you see today is a situation, the emergency, I think is completely unwarranted. It was imposed, of course, because of, the government tells us, because of these protests and violence. There was one violent incident in Miriana before the imposition of emergency. But what you see, what really brought this about is an economic crisis. But the economic crisis, in my opinion, was brought about by a political crisis, and that is a crisis of governance. So people trusted a particular political dispensation to govern. There was so much of excitement. There was the talk about 69 lakhs and development and so on and so forth, and together with that there was this, real nationalistic, ethno-nationalistic sentiments being championed and expressed. And even the sentiment, I must say, even on the part of highly educated people, what's the good of these liberal niceties? I've been told, when I was chair of the Human Rights Commission, there have sometimes scholars who would say, what's the point of having these liberal niceties? Because right now what we want is development. So if I may just continue, therefore, what happened was people reposed faith in a unreserved manner, and then it ended up with the 20th Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah. So let's get back to all that momentarily, Deepika. But I need to question you with regard to the Human Rights Commission's activities when you were the chair as well, because when you spoke about the ethno-nationalistic sentiments that was in Sri Lanka, this did not start today. It mainly started a few years ago. That was right after the Easter Sunday bombings on the 21st of April 2019. Now at that time, the Human Rights Commission was very silent. There was a ban on niqabs that was effective at that time. Then there was the emergency regulations that came into play from the 22nd of April to the 23rd of August. It's easy now to come here and criticize the present government, but we need to look at what happened at that time as well. Isn't that the start of all this? Do you think that you, as the Human Rights Commission at that time, if you took action at that time, this wouldn't have boiled down to this level?
I completely disagree with you. First of all, ethno-nationalism in this country has a very long history. I mean, even if you go back to the deprivation of the upcountry Tamil people of citizenship, the Sinhala, the official language act and so on. I mean, this has a very, very long history. And politics has always, whatever the political dispensation may be, has always used these divisive tactics. And you are completely wrong about the Human Rights Commission not taking action after the Easter Sunday bombings, because if you go through the website even today of the Human Rights Commission, you'll find a large number of statements, letters, representations that the Commission made in regard to all those discriminatory acts which discriminated against the Muslim community, together with also the violations on the part of those who were taken into custody on suspicion. So, for example, all this imposition of dress codes in the government sector, for example, it was the Human Rights Commission which made representations and stopped it. So, that's completely a misrepresentation, I'm sorry to say, of facts.
Because if you look at the thuggery of these ministers, Deepika, if you notice, Rear Admiral Sarath Veerasekara issued death threats against the HRC chairperson at that time as well, over matters relating to the conduct of the UNHRC. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, did that shy away in terms of the activities and the conduct of the Human Rights Commission?
Absolutely not. I think everybody who knows about the activities of the Human Rights Commission at that time knows very well that we did not shy away from anything, that was within our mandate. And that precisely is why I think we, in a way, attracted the ire of this particular, individual who is now also very heartening, was that there was a very massive response to that threat. I mean, that sort of died down. But I think the manner in which the Human Rights Commission functioned at that time, it's very difficult, as a former chair to say good things about one's own activities. That's up to the public to judge. But I think it set a certain standard. And there is an expectation that the Human Rights Commission should manner in an independent manner. So I think, this is also part of the problem. When institutions attempt to act in an independent and strong manner, and that's also seen in a different light, where do you go from there?
No, but isn't it sad, Deepika, that the Human Rights Commission issued a statement to the chairperson of the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka, and said about the niqab, the banning of the niqab, and then several months after, we were experiencing COVID, and everyone were masked, and there was no way to find out who was entering where. Absolutely, the human rights position was that we were very much against the banning of the niqab from a cultural perspective, but we did recognize at that time there was a security threat, and so therefore that any type of face coverings could, the banning of any type of face coverings could be, that prohibition we did recognize. But the cultural banning of the niqab or any type of attire was completely, completely rejected by the Human Rights Commission. So I'm not quite sure what this line of argument is, but the point is, I think at that point in time, all communities rallied around the Human Rights Commission. Rallied around in the sense there was a sense that they could come to the Human Rights Commission for protection, that we would respond, and particularly so regarding the behind. Thank you very much, Dr. Deepika Odugama, former chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Before I move on to the Q&A from our journalists, Sharan Benedict and Shehan Ranathuka, let me just speak to Trehan Munasinghe. Trehan, are you there?
Yes,
Trehan?
I'm here, Chan.
Trehan, I know you joined us before as well, but for the benefit of our viewers who are joining us today on Face the Nation, just give us a brief introduction about yourself.
Yes, thank you once again for having me on the show. Briefly, I'm from a HR background, plus into real estate advisory. So professionally, I meet a lot of young people and people in their middle age, and mostly handle their recruitment work.
Right. So Trehan, I've seen you as well at several protests that were staged across Sri Lanka in the recent past. What do you all demand? I know it's a question that I should not probably even ask you, because we know what the sentiments are, but what is it that you are demanding at the moment as a professional?
Well, Shamin, to put it as clearly as possible, from a youth angle, today Sri Lanka is facing unprecedented crisis, which I'm afraid many people who are at the top haven't realized or are not willing to realize. So that's why we are having so many protests, so many outcries. Not only are we having it in Sri Lanka, but like I've seen on your channel and even on social media, it is a global movement. The hashtag has gone global. I think it is unseen before, even in any other situation across the world when it comes to Israel, Palestine, or the Ukrainian-Russian matter, or any other uprising. It has been kind of curtailed to certain regions, but we see how it has exploded all over the world. And the fact that on Sunday, the protest was blocked by this government and with sudden declaration of curfew and so on, it has just blown out of proportion. And if there was going to be a protest on the 3rd, now there'll be protests for months until the public get what they want. And to answer your question, what the people want is for the president to respect the mandate that he was given to make Sri Lanka a better place for everyone, not only themselves, but for everyone, all of us. And today, where are we today? We have gone back 20, 30 years.
So, Trehan, now, basing on what Rajiv Amarsurya, former Secretary of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, is saying, we don't have any option but to do with the 225 members who are in Parliament at present. So in a situation like that, what is it that individuals like you are demanding? It seems that we've almost hit a brick wall now.
So I mean, as Sri Lankans are, I would say, one of the most, how can I say, patient people. They have been so patient. And it has come to a point that they just can't take it anymore. What they want, I don't know whether I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, but they, I feel, right now just want the basics, which is sad. The people just wanting the basics. Then they want this government and the president and the opposition to work out a solution for the betterment of this republic. It is very simple. There is nothing more. We want a country where we can live, work, and have a good quality of life. What is the quality of life that Sri Lankans have today?
Right. Also joining us this evening is Menaka Mayadana. Menaka, you also joined us a couple of weeks ago on Face the Nation, but for the benefit of our viewers, a quick introduction about yourself would be great.
Sure. Hi, Shamir. Thank you so much once again for having me on here again. So very quickly, my background is that I have been teaching and working with young kids for over 10 years. And subsequently, I have gone into the field of operations, and I'm currently a working manager in operations. I'm also a mom, and right now a proud protester.
Right. A proud protester. I was about to say, aren't we all? Right. Anyway, so Menaka, interestingly, we've heard Rajiv, Bhavani, Nishan, and Deepika expressing their views about the current situation in the country.
Yeah.
What is the next step? What must the protesters even do now? Because it seems that the government is very steadfast about what they want. This morning they appointed a cabinet with several members. Now you're wondering, is this the way forward? Today there is a meeting between 132 parliamentarians and the President and the Prime Minister. The outcome of that meeting is yet to be known. Now people are protesting. The tagline is "Gota go home," or "Gota go home," or various other things, using profanity at times, describing the current leadership of the country. What is the next step?
Well, Shamir, to add on to what Trehan was also answering, I mean, I was part of the original feud that started off in Kohola. And what we started protesting was the gross mismanagement of the country that has brought us into this current economic crisis. And what we were protesting for was 100% accountability, not just from the president, but from all 225 representatives of people. So the next step, and it's actually part of the question that I wanted to pose to the panel as well, is how do we, and I recall that I asked this question from the last panel as well, how do we implement real accountability? And bear with my directness, but beyond the quantification, beyond saying, yes, we need to be accountable, how do we make or change frameworks legally and policy-wise to really hold this government accountable for what they have done in the past, as well as whatever transitionary activity they have to do, because I agree with the panel, we do have a constitutional crisis. It's not like we can tell everyone to just go home. But during this transition, they are still being amazingly arrogant in the fact that they have not even addressed the people. They are not making the right appointments still, despite the people's voice being very clear. So legally, how do we implement accountability framework to hold them to the mandate that they have been given by the people? Because that's the next step. The next step is from this point onwards, are we getting updates every day from the ministers and from the government as to what steps they're taking? Because there's still no transparency.
Right. So let me interrupt you for a second, if you don't mind, Menaka. You have a very good question with regard to accountability. I want to direct this question to Dr. Deepika. Dr. Deepika, on the 1st of April, the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka filed an FR petition saying that fuel should be provided to the Ceylon Electricity Board. They cite several members as respondents. Two of them have now resigned, that is the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Power and Energy. In a situation like that, where does accountability really lie?
Yeah, that's a major problem. And I think it's, you know, there are inadequacies in the law, there is no doubt about it, but it is also about the need of a vigilant public, I would certainly say, you know, which really looks at, it's not only about the Public Utilities Commission situation, but if you look at corruption, for example, or violation of rights, I think it's absolutely important at every possible turn to raise these issues and together with the legal community take up these issues. Now today, for example, in the morning, a member of the public was asking me, why is it that the Bribery Commission is absolutely, you know, functioning in a very weak manner.
Lethargic manner.
Lethargic manner. And so the question was, isn't it possible for us to bring a fundamental rights case for inaction? And that because of the inaction of the Bribery Commission, that public funds are being swindled and our rights are being violated. So I think, you know, all these questions that were on the minds of the people, they are coming to a certain point where people are now saying, yes, we can challenge the system. We should be challenging the system. So, you know, this is not something that happened just suddenly. This has been going on for a very long period of time, lack of accountability. And I think we need to also examine our own role as citizens. Have we been active citizens?
Yeah, Deepika, now if you look at this government's track record, the Rajapaksa family, it's very evident it has not been a very rosy picture in terms of human rights. What is the message you have for the protesters who are staging protests? Because they also have to exercise some sort of caution, don't they? Because they, under emergency regulations, they can arrest anyone they want to and lock them up.
Well, the whole point is, I don't think, you know, declaration of emergency was warranted at all. You know, for a situation like this, it was an overreaction. It's absolutely disproportionate. Now, this is an unprecedented situation. I think everybody, all the panelists are accepting that. In that, these are spontaneous civic protests. They are not organized politically. And also there's a class dimension which is extremely novel, in the sense that you see urban middle class people, even upper middle class people participating in this protest, because there's a sense that things have come to a head and there's no sort of, you know, we can't go beyond this. We can't go on like this.
No, what I don't understand.
So therefore, where the human rights situation is concerned, I think we need to keep that protest movement going in a very peaceful manner. We mean people should keep the protest going in a very peaceful manner. And whatever human rights violations that are happening, for example, like the banning of the media or shutting down of social media, etc. All those things have to be challenged, but one thing is that violence should not be used, because that would give the authorities reason to crack down.
Because if you look at it, Deepika, now what happened recently in Mirihana, there was one individual who goes near the bus and sets the bus ablaze. And on the video, it's very clear that most of the police officers are just
they're watching
what's going on. So what happened at that time was, based on the Public Properties Destruction of Act, they arrested 54 members. So, and now they're requesting the public to assist, the CID is requesting the public to assist with the person who set ablaze, when there were several police officers who were bystanders to that incident.
So this is absolutely abuse of the law, and we all know that. And it was on the pretext of that violence at Mirihana that day that the state of emergency was declared, on the basis that
all this was planned. All this was planned.
So those are the things that need to be investigated and proved. And I think citizens also need to do their own, looking at all these the visuals and so on, and raising these issues. It's absolutely essential that the distortions and the abuse of law be taken up in a major way. But the most important thing is, if the people are to achieve something, in terms of political reforms, non-violence is absolutely essential.
Right.
But because I want to say that, we can talk about individual violations, we can talk about torture, arbitrary arrest, the sort of violation of freedom of expression and so on and so forth. But behind all this, the root cause is really a huge governance issue.
Right.
And it's really the 20th Amendment. So, we can talk about the symptoms, and we can talk about the root cause.
Right.
And I think we really need to get to the root cause in order to, find some sort of a long-lasting solution.
Right.
Dr. Dugama, if I could just stay with you for a moment.
Sure.
You spoke about violence. There is CCTV footage being circulated of brutality that the protesters experienced at the hands of law enforcement. Where do we stand in this area? Can we expect the law to be, for the law to be actioned when it comes to police brutality?
The law to be?
For action to be taken against law enforcement?
Well, I mean, the institutions are there, the laws are there, so it's a question of, having it implemented. This is why we need independent institutions. Now, this is a moment where the Police Commission, the Human Rights Commission, among others, have to be extremely very active. This is why I'm saying a lot of what's going on today can be traced to the 20th Amendment. But I also see on the other side, if there's a breakdown in institutions and a weakness on the part of institutions, civic consciousness has come to the fore. And I think people are, monitoring the Bar Association. This is extremely unprecedented, where the bars, and hats off to them, I think, so that dimension is there. What we need to do is to use this experience at this crossroads to say, okay, we need a system whereby consistently we need accountability. Right. And for that we need good, independent, robust institutions. We need officials who can function independently. And we also, the most importantly, civil society in the sense of citizens, are constantly conscious and monitor these situations, because without that sort of combination, you can't have the rule of law in a country. So the police brutality, I also saw visuals of the police and some men in a blue uniform. I mean, I don't know, there is a lot of discussion as to who they may be, chasing a person into an alley, a cul-de-sac, and beating up that person, and the neighbors attending to that person. So those are things that need to be looked at, and this is where, without even a complaint, need to investigate.
Dr. Deepika, before I move on, just one final question to Dr. Deepika. This is probably an issue that many people are facing right now. I know this because I face it personally. So when many of the young Facebook, there is a massive fear, not in our hearts, but in the hearts of our parents. They might come for you. And despite repeated assurances from the government that human rights are being kept, human rights are being respected, what we see is really speaks volumes and it doesn't really tally with what the government says. So my question to you, Dr. Deepika, is what would be the message? You know, you said that people need to continue to come out, people need to continue to voice their opinions, people need to continue to be engaged. With this real fear, with this real threat looming, we've seen this happen. We've seen people die, we've seen people get injured. We saw people get injured in Mirihana. We saw how people were walking, we were being taken to hospital with holes in their feet. So with this real threat looming, what would be your message to parents who may be watching this show and wondering?
I do recognize it. I think as Sri Lankans we've learned to live with fear for decades. And this has happened, together with the onset of emergency. We've lived under emergency for 40 years, from 1971 to 2011. We've had the PTA, Prevention of Terrorism Act, being used, and basically the state becoming violent. The result was that people became very cowed down. And it's a habit to become fearful. I've seen this. Sometimes you don't even have anything to be fearful of, but you are very frightened, and that is a way of life. And that is the best asset for an authoritarian regime. Authoritarian regimes really like citizens who are cowed down and who are fearful. So in order to change this culture, we really do need to, as citizens, organize ourselves and take, strengthen ourselves. You can't do this alone, but we have to consciousness. And this comes with time, with activism, with participation in public affairs and so on. But we have to grapple with fear.
And I of course believe that, the protection that was given to certain suspects who were arrested in Mirihana and other people like social media activists who were arrested, the protection or the reassurances given by the Bar Association and many other lawyers and many other civic groups is a little bit of at least consolation to parents and other loved ones who might be scared.
So that's the result. I think this is where we need to take heart and say that things are changing. I don't know for how long we can sustain this. I don't know if the Bar Association would act like that for the for years to come.
Dr. Deepika,
but we have to say is we are the citizens of this country. We are the citizens of this country. We are the ones who need to take matters into our own hands, not the law into our own hands, but we are the ones who have to work towards protecting the rule of law, preserving the rule of law, preserving democracy, and so on. So I think, I may be wrong here, but I think what we are discovering today is that we have been quite active voters, but not very active citizens.
So Bhavani, interestingly, we've seen such predicaments not only in Sri Lanka. Years before, we've seen how Tunisian government was toppled by a public outcry. We saw how the Egyptian government was toppled because of a public outcry. Now, it's happening again in Sri Lanka as well. Now, one of the slogans that most of the protesters are saying is, Rajapaksas to go home. Now, where does accountability lie? Because at the end of the day, if you're getting off the bus, you better pay up the money that you've swindled. Don't get off the bus without paying us up. Don't you think so?
Definitely. I think that's the big question. Just them stepping down doesn't mean it ends there. But it's a bigger question. You raise these things about the Arab Springs and what happened with people mobilizing and calling for change in other countries. Now that's happening here. But what next? So it also comes back to some of the questions raised by, I think, Trevor and Menaha as well, is, we can all protest. We can go and voice our concerns, call for action, but we also need to think about what is the short term and what is the long term. What are the options available? Now, there is a parliament that's going to sit tomorrow. Citizens would have to the 225 members of parliament.
Parliament in a few hours?
You never know. You never know. But this is also, this comes back to one big question, is there is one individual that has such broad powers. That's the executive presidency. Now, that is an institution that requires immediate reform. Immediate reform. And I would say that's something we start off with. We talk about the 20th Amendment, which was in 2020, some of us challenged it in court, we raised concerns. Now, that needs to go ASAP. But that taking out the 20th Amendment or repealing the 20th Amendment does not end the problems.
But what
you have to abolish,
yeah.
no, you have to abolish the executive presidency, that's critical, but there has to be a whole gamut of reforms that are in place. Who is going to take the lead? What is the plan?
But what a joke, Bhavani. 18th Amendment to the Constitution, same set of rogues went and voted. 19th Amendment to the Constitution, same set of individuals went and voted. 20th Amendment to the Constitution, same set of people went and voted. Now you're saying 21st Amendment to the Constitution, the same set of people are going to vote.
Well, that's the unfortunate thing, is that some of the people who vote for the same amendments are in Parliament. They have no problem voting for different positions, and that's a huge issue of accountability. You know, the issue that there are members of Parliament who may not even understand what they're voting for, because the incentives for them are different.
So Nishan, I remember when the Yapalne government came into power, one of the ministers at that time said we have to close down the airport and make sure that you arrest the individuals who are the perpetrators who brought us to this situation. This was in 2015. The Yapalne government had a good opportunity ensure that there is rule of law in the country, but what happened? Don't you think there is a failure of the previous government also in respect to this? Because all these people who are now in power were charged, and even Minister Ali Sabri said that he has appeared for nearly, I think, 15 to 16 cases of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa as well. He said this in Parliament. So don't you think the opportunity was there? And it is the same politicians who are there in Parliament who has given us this entire mess.
Shamir, so the thing is, now when there is a change of government, what happens is, this is my personal opinion,
right.
What I feel is that the law enforcement seemingly gets lackluster. It doesn't work as it did in favor of the government which was in power previously. So evidence tends to go missing, the prosecution doesn't act diligently. So there is seemingly, that is an issue which needs to be addressed. How do we sustain charges which have been brought about during a previous regime, and then during the change of regime, how is it going to be continued? Because a lot of people, unfortunately, they try to pin it on the judiciary, but the judiciary is not at fault. The judiciary in our country is independent. We all, I think, will stand on that fact. But in a criminal matter, it's the prosecution, and generally it's the police or the prosecution which has to set forth evidence.
But even the Attorney General's Department, Nishan, you are well aware, did not even file indictments properly at the court. As a result of that, these cases were dismissed. Do you remember?
Yeah, so the thing is, everything revolves around evidence and prosecuting on the evidence which is placed before the matter. So if the witness goes missing.
Yeah, when the president is saying that this is not a predicament that befell as far as my government is concerned, he is absolutely correct. Because if the previous government took action, they probably would have all been behind bars.
My position, Shamir, is every government has to be accountable. And you have to find a mechanism. Now you all were talking about the fact that people are trying to leave the country. People were trying to leave the country in 2015. People were trying to leave the country now. So what is the safeguards we have? Now we can
no, but people are leaving the country, that's right.
Yes.
But there is an exodus of people trying to leave the country now.
Definitely. So if
318,000, I don't think you have the facts, but 318,000 passports were issued just in 3 months in Sri Lanka.
Definitely. And I am fully with you. Even people who are professional, even lawyers for that matter, are even considering to migrate.
So, are you considering that?
In the interest of our children.
Yeah.
Because now we are talking about leaders here. We are talking about bringing in people into power who are going to be accountable, who are going to be professional, who are going to uplift Sri Lanka to a certain level in 10 years. But the fact of the matter is, Shamir, and I think the entire panel can correct me, now when people come into power, they seemingly go completely haywire, completely against the mandate which they represented to the people. And they within the 5-year tenure or the 4.5-year tenure, do things which the people can't keep on questioning them. Now, for example, now the executive presidency, which was supposed to be abolished under the Yahapalana regime, was not abolished. It was the powers with the executive.
No, but Nishan,
no, I'm not blaming Yahapalana. No, I'm not.
Let's stop, beat around the bush. How many governments have said that they will
that is the
abolish the executive presidency? Chandrika Bandaranayakumarthan came to power saying that she is going to abolish the executive presidency.
Yes.
Ranil Wickremesinghe in 2001 came into power saying that he is going to make sure that he abolishes the executive presidency. 2005, Mahinda Rajapaksa came into power that he is going to abolish the executive president. 2010, he was reappointed saying that he is going to abolish the executive president. 2015, Maithripala Sirisena came. He also said that he is going to abolish the executive president. 2020, Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power saying that we have to strengthen the presidency. We have to make sure that there is an autocratic leadership, because most of the monks in Sri Lanka said we want a Hitler. Now we've got that, of course, properly.
So coming back to the point, Shamir, how do we hold these people accountable when they make this representation to us that they are going to do a certain thing and they do not do it? Now, if you take a company for that matter, if a director in a company violates or does not act according to the constitution or the articles of the company, the members or the shareholders can remove the director. Now, do we have a provision to remove parliamentarians?
Nishan, you're a celebrated lawyer, because I've seen the work that you've done. You've not only handled cases in Sri Lanka. Is there any way all the parliamentarians tomorrow can get together in parliament and impeach the president?
Yes, the constitution provides for that. That is there. 2/3 majority can be a vote can be taken to impeach the president, and then a referendum. You all can correct me. And a referendum, go to the people, come back to parliament, president can be impeached.
Isn't this notion, Nishan, that has to be championed right now by the opposition to democratically topple the government?
Now,
because now you say you can impeach the president.
Yes.
So tomorrow, let's say parliament convenes democratically, there is a way the opposition can champion and topple the government.
Yes.
The way is to impeach the president and then call for snap elections. If you show confidence in parliament by 113 members in parliament, you can also get the prime ministerial position to the opposition as well. And the next person who will be running the country would be the prime minister, because there won't be president, because he has been constitutionally impeached. In a situation like that, don't you think this is the notion that the opposition collectively should strive to achieve on behalf, for the sake of the people?
Ideally, for the sake of the people, we should not go for election now. I don't believe in an election in the state of our country. We don't even have paper. We can't go and print electoral ballots at this juncture. So the cost of an election is quite expensive. We should not go there. We should not drive our country for election. But as you said, Shamir, I would say the ideal position the opposition can take. Now, I was listening to the opposition leader, the honorable opposition leader yesterday. Now, he talks about not wanting to form a coalition government. But couldn't he say that he can, if he can command the majority of parliament, he can tell the speaker to go for a vote and see who commands the majority in respect. So that's the thing. So all these are constitutional matters. So we are here.
These are not, Nishant, these are not constitutional matters. This is a political tug of war. These are not constitutional matters.
Definitely. So
if
now
all the politicians unite for one cause,
yes,
if the parliament unites for one cause, they can do the needful. But the problem right now is the SJB is pulling from one side, the NPP is trying to pull from one side, the UNP is trying to pull from one side,
200%.
the TNA is trying to pull from another side,
200%.
the people, the Udayagamabila faction and the Vimal Veeravansa faction are trying to pull from another side, the SLPP are trying to pull from another side. So what does it leave? It leaves people to go onto the streets and protest, to demand what they want. Don't you think so?
Yes, definitely. And the people have sent a very strong message, which the hierarchy is now feeling. They are definitely feeling. Otherwise,
but don't you think, Nishan,
yeah,
when we speak about all these matters, do you think that we have the right leadership to lead, even in parliament? Do you see that leadership?
Unfortunately not. I do not see that. I am being brutally honest. I do not, because, you know, when we select a leader, we cannot select a man on his previous track record on a certain matter. Because
like Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
I'm not talking about a figure. I'm talking about now. We
let me tell you a figure.
We are very impulsive. We will jump.
You deserve your comments.
We will jump on a leader saying, "meya thamai දැන් රටට හොඳ." But the thing is, Harry, so now the point is, we all have figured out that one man can't run a experienced personnel. You can't be, with all due respect, running to a public entity and seeing whether that entity is functioning. You can't be micromanaging.
Yeah, we learned hard because we saw President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. I don't think you mentioned names, but we saw President Gotabaya Rajapaksa also trying to micromanage. He used to have this Gamasadra Pilisadarak. Right now, try and see to have a Gamasadra Pilisadarak. Anyway, that's up to the president.
So coming back again, Shamil, to your question, do I see leadership? Leadership should be selected by all of us, including everyone, by looking at the entire battalion. So and so is going to bring with him. Now we saw whatever, we saw, I don't know earlier what was brought in, they were all portrayed as intellectuals. So I am losing confidence as much as you are losing confidence.
Anyway, it's very laughable, Nishan, you know.
No, but it's not a laughable matter. You asked me whether I am considering migrating.
Yeah.
No, in the plight, you consider the plight of our children.
Okay.
You know that. I don't want to talk about it.
Rajiv, now we speak about professionals being appointed to positions. Now, when we appoint people, don't you think the government should at least think now? Because as Nishan said, we've learned the hard way. We now have learned that just because someone is good at one job doesn't mean that that person can rule a country. That's what Nishan said. I'm probably trying to put words in Nishan's mouth now, but that's what Nishan.
It was a general context, right? It was a general.
So anyway, Rajiv. So what is now? We appoint a minister of highways. With all these problems that we are facing now, minister of highways. Now I'll tell you a classic example. Just a few days ago, the Minister of Agriculture had called for bids to procure 7,000 digital tablets to be distributed among agrarian officers. Here we are facing a forex crisis, and the Agriculture Ministry is calling for bids to procure 7,000 digital tablets. Probably the minister wanted to make some quick money before the cabinet was reshuffled or cabinet minister stepped down. Then last week, the focus, the SLPP's focus was, you know what, Rajiv, I don't think you know, the May Day rally. Here we are facing a crisis in the country. The Minister of Finance, then Minister of Finance, holds a meeting about the next May Day rally before he goes to Washington. Now, this was not reported, this was reported in the media on Sunday. What is this, Rajiv?
Yes, Shamir, I think we are all in agreement that a majority of the 225 should not be sitting there. Now this government came in with a huge mandate, 6.9 million voters, and see 2 years down the line, see where we are. Now, had they made the right decisions, done the right things, they would not be where they are. And they obviously continue, as you said, you had several examples about the tabs and other things. They seem to still be doing or making decisions which they should not be. As to the appointment of the Minister of Highways, your guess is as good as mine as to why on earth one needs a Minister of Highways.
Johnson Fernando, who said about printing money that we have all the...
Among four ministers.
You know what Minister Johnson Fernando said? No, Rajiv, I don't think you are aware. He said that we have rupees, but we don't have dollars. We wanted him to tell us that. Anyway, yeah.
So of course, one must also look at it is the voters who have put them there.
Exactly.
So now we need to find a way, Shamir.
Yeah.
I think we are at a crossroad. I don't think we have had this opportunity in the last 74 years. Everyone talks about change, systematic change in the course of direction, all that. But I think we have now found an opportunity where this can be done. Now we must actually work out as to how this can be done.
How so?
So change can't be brought in overnight. Now we have constitutional issues, constitutional structures. One may not want it to go into an election. We can't afford to go into an election. It costs 5-6 billion rupees. So let us see how this can be done. And initially, we need to get this situation under control. We have 225 members there. out of which we need to have some government formed of those who maybe one can't generalize and say all those 225 can't do a job of work. There are people among that 225 who can maybe come out under the spotlight and perform. Now what we need to do is, at this juncture, we need to get them to form this government. It can be a national government, whatever you call it, of the best out of the 225 to fill those important portfolios and try to take us out of this mess we are in. Now, having said that, we need to have the pressure on this government, on these 225 to perform. But having said that, the opportunity we get to change this, reset this whole dynamic, is at the next election, whether it's a presidential or general election. So if this public protest, the pressure can be continued until that election is reached, and that is the point where we have again, I say, in the last 74 years, that is the opportunity to bring that 225 new members we want to into parliament. Now there is at the moment across the country, because of the mistakes made by this government, some of those, for example, like the fertilizer issue, one can't understand why on earth they got into this at this juncture, but they did so. So your TAB example is not surprising, because they went and, the fertilizer issue was something which I don't think any reasonable person would have gone into. So having said that, if we can have this pressure mounted on the 225 to bring this country out of what we are, but of course keeping in mind that at the end of this 2 years or 2.5 years, we have whatever methods or whatever way we can to bring in a new set of people, maybe at least another 100, 150,
right,
who can take leadership, whether it's a president, whether it's prime minister.
So today I saw Rajiv on social media, people are talking about individuals like Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy to take up bigger positions now in a caretaker government. Can that happen? Those who are not within parliament, can the president at least appoint individuals who probably have a sound knowledge on the subject that they're talking about to cabinet positions? Does
you can have resignation, national list, you can have members coming out and
but can that, now individuals like Dr. Newsfirst.lk Kumaraswamy would not want to come and sit down as a parliamentarian when probably he can serve. He's already advising the president on the IMF matters. Dr. Newsfirst.lk Kumaraswamy, Shanta Devarajan, as well as Shamini Kurea advising the president on the IMF bailout plan as well. So in a situation like that, can individuals of this caliber?
There are key roles in this country now. The governor of the central bank, Secretary Minister of Finance, maybe Secretary Minister of Economic Affairs. There are key positions which drive this country. So those positions can be filled by cabinet can listen to the technocrats. There's nothing, 20, 30 years ago, cabinet would have listened. So you don't need ministers to make decisions, they can go and advise. So whether it's the secretary to the president, advisor to the cabinet, you have a lot of key positions you can fill in. And then I think the governor of the central bank also had requested, and he was in cabinet rank. I think the Sri Lankan High Commission in India is of cabinet rank, so you have modalities. End of the day, I don't think people like Mr. Kumaraswamy is expecting position. He wants to contribute.
He wants to help.
So you need to bring in those people into those key positions, and if the cabinet listens to advice, you can have a bunch of idiots in the cabinet. So as long as they listen to proper advice and take this country forward.
Or else they will listen to the advice and take their own.
No, that is a problem, Shamir. If I must also say this, it's not about, some say 19th, 20th. I am someone who doesn't believe in you. Really, it's not the structure. You need the right people with the right background, with decent people, who will be accountable to themselves.
Right. But it's Bhavani now. Look at the country's state of affairs now. I will tell you a classic example. I don't know whether you recollect Operation Pumale, which was in 1987 on the 4th of June. That was the Indian Air Force dropping off rations to the Jaffna Peninsula as a result of not sending goods in that time frame. Now look at the Indian Minister of External Affairs. He comes to Sri Lanka, looks at a problem at the Peradeniya Hospital, and tweets regarding it, and then tells the tells the High Commissioner in Sri Lanka to act on it. So isn't there protocol? Are they just because they are giving us money? Do they expect us to bow down to those conditions as well? Isn't that what these politicians done to us?
I mean, Shamir, the question is, why did we have to wait till a foreign dignitary had to tweet? Our own government should have raised this, and they had this information. And I go back to this point Rajiv made, you know, if we have the right experts in terms of addressing issues. Now, for example, look at the fertilizer ban. The experts were advising that the ban was going to be disastrous. Did the president, the cabinet listen? No. They had their own plans, and look at the situation now. We have a unprecedented food security issue. So, you know, if the elected representatives in government are not listening to the subject matter experts or the doctors or whoever who are raising these issues, one then has to resort to, I mean, it happened because there was a public notice on social media, and that got viral, and then the Foreign Secretary of India had to intervene.
But Bhavani, isn't it sad that a minister from our neighboring country is trying to address the problems in Sri Lanka? We saw even the Minister of External Affairs going to the IOC petrol shed right opposite the Nelum Pokuri International Theatre as well. While no minister, no cabinet minister will be able to even step into one of the
Definitely. And Shamir, that goes back to the fact that this government does not have the credibility or the confidence, I would say even the spine to take action now. It's crisis mode, and they are failing. They're flailing at in a way unprecedented level.
India is trying to twist our hand now. They are trying to show their muscle, aren't they?
Well, we go to different international actors. We've got to that situation where we're going with a begging bowl to India, to China, to Bangladesh, to Iran. I mean, we are in that situation. And it goes back to the question of why are we in this situation? Why do we have a government that keeps going to all these international actors? But this is very important. This week, we're likely to have, I don't know if this is going to happen, but there's going to be a parliament debate on the IMF bailout and that report. I think this is an opportunity for members of parliament, for opposition, but possibly even those who were part of this government to raise questions as to why are we in this situation? What is the plan? Ask these questions.
If the parliament is not prorogued.
Well, you seem to have some information the parliament is going to be prorogued.
It may be, because that's the only way
that could be, but that goes to the whole point that we are living day to day, dependent on one individual who can decide tonight or tomorrow what he wants to do. So there are no checks and balances in this country now.
When you spoke about the begging bowl incident, Bhavani, I recollect, we had Taraka Balasuri on the show several weeks ago. And I posed him a question with regard to why did they go to Pakistan and request the Pakistani government for $300 million when they very well know that even Pakistan cannot survive with their foreign currency. And the answer the minister of that time said was, they are providing us $300 million. Now where is the $300 million? Even going with a begging bowl to countries, they went to Nigeria requesting for oil.
So, I mean, Shamir, all these points actually raise a very fundamental point. It's become a laughing stock in terms of what this government has done. But it is also a question of priorities of this government. You know, we still have a budget, the allocation for defense being the biggest allocation. This is at a time of a pandemic. We are in economic crisis, but the defense establishment still gets the most significant much needed support, we also have to get our house in order. And our house in order doesn't mean just looking at the president and the cabinet and thinking overnight this is going to change. We have to have systems in place. We have to have structures in place. But we also have to have this political culture that we cannot rely on one individual. This is going to take a long time. We all, I think, recognize this. But just getting money is not going to solve the problem. We have to address the fundamentals.
So, joining us via Zoom is now Angelo De Silva. Angelo, are you there? Angelo, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Right, I can hear you now. Super, loud and clear. Angelo, for the benefit of our viewers, give us a brief introduction about yourself so we all know what you do.
Sure. I'm an entrepreneur and management consultant by profession. I'm also a corporate trainer and writer and producer for children's television.
Right. Great, Angelo. A lot of work under your belt. Good job. Angelo, interestingly, there was a time in Sri Lanka when we speak about the Rajapaksa regime that people were scared. There was a self-imposed censorship even in 2008-2009 during the war in Sri Lanka because of the acts of the regime at that time. We saw the manner in which how many journalists were killed, people like Lasantha Wickrematunge. We were attacked as a network, not only us, but several other networks were also attacked. People were scared to come onto the streets and protest and say anything because there was a self-imposed censorship. But today, people have thrown that notion out of the window. They've just thrown it out. They come onto the streets. Today when I went to one of the protests to report, I saw people removing their masks and protesting. They are not scared anymore. When there was a curfew that was imposed on Sunday, people were on the streets. It seems that the fear psychosis that the people had before about this regime being this and that is no more. They just want justice, don't they?
Yes, they do. I mean, with us today are three of the members who stood for this movement 34 days ago. Like Menaka said, Christopher, myself, Menaka, and a few other like-minded people. And of course, we were very scared on that first day. There's a viral video that I very proudly launched with my name on it, only to come back and realize what I had done. And of course, I was waiting to be kidnapped by a white pen, but here I am talking to you today. But 34 days later, well, that is the biggest kind of win that we have got. We have got people to realize that the power is actually with us. Yes. We appoint these people, we hold them accountable. They are there to do our bidding. And the moment that the mindset of the general public changes towards this, I think Sri Lanka can definitely be a better place because people are more cognizant of wielding that power and using that power. Of course, to what limits that they go to do this will have to be definitely under supervision. But nonetheless, it is a huge win for all of us that people have realized that they don't need to be afraid, that they can go out there and speak.
Angela, interestingly, if you are taken into custody, Rajiv and Nishan would appear on your behalf, and there will be 100 other lawyers who will be waiting to appear on your behalf if something of that sort happens. And even Bhavani is also an attorney at law. She also can probably represent you. So don't have any worries on that. Angelo, you were one of the pioneers who came to the streets. I recollect when you all started off your protest campaign in Kohuala as a silent protest, and then you all had protests going on in areas like Mount Lavinia, Jayala. There were several pockets of protests that were organized. What is the message you have for them now? Do you think that you all have won a battle, or do you all think that you all have won the war already?
No, not at all. The message still stands. We are still going to continue our silent protests. The protests have taken two different fronts. The silent protests were the more mature protests where mostly were professionals who had very stern demands of accountability. However, the inspiration that these silent protests gave the general public have manifested into more protests of unleashing emotions and frustrations. But the silent protests will continue because we have just barely scratched the surface of making a change. We have put tremendous pressure, yes, but there are further demands that need to be made in terms of accountability, and there's a long way to go.
So Angelo, when you saw the message on the papers, which was a Daily Mirror website which reported that Namal Rajapaksa's wife and the in-laws have gone out of the country, it does not say fled, but gone out of the country to an undisclosed location, what was running in your mind as an ordinary person? Tell me.
Deja vu. I mean, I was wondering, didn't this happen in 2015? And here we are 7 years later seeing the same thing. And this is the problem with accountability. So the politicians will always flee, or the law is so loose and the structure is so loose here that it's a matter of the fox guarding the hen house. So as people put a lot of pressure, which happened in 2015, the same band of thieves, we will see them fleeing and running away, and then another government or another group of politicians struggling for several years to get them back into the country, only to charge them with the felonies that they should have been charged, and then getting away again.
Yeah, thanks, Angelo. I want to get through to Christopher as well. Christopher, are you there, or can I get back to you in a minute, if you don't mind, please? You're there?
Hi, Shamir.
Right. Hi, Christopher. Just give me a second. I just want to quickly pose a question to Bhavani and then come back to you. Bhavani, Ranjan Ramanayaka, who was now the imprisoned parliamentarian, not a parliamentarian anymore, said that all of these people are friends. All these politicians, all these individuals are friends. Do you believe that?
Possibly. I mean, they look like they're all friends, but look, they have a duty when they get elected, friends apart. When you come into parliament, when you come into government, there are particular responsibilities. So whoever your friends are, you leave that aside and do what you need to do. Unfortunately, that mindset, that culture is not ingrained in most of our members of parliament. Many, I would say, feel that when they come into parliament, that's the best way to either make money or get ahead, and they're not thinking of their constituents. And it goes back to the point we've been making. Political accountability needs to be going beyond the election cycle. It shouldn't be just at the election cycle, but it needs to continue. So what the protests have happened, and all kudos to the ones who started and continue to do it and has spread this, is that this need to be now garnered to keep that pressure on members of parliament, political leadership. But also, I think we need to recognize this, Shamir, is that it's a very special, unique moment. We can talk about procedures, things that have happened in the past. Sri Lanka is in a very unique moment, very unique. Now we can keep complaining about the things that have not worked, and there's a whole list of it. But what is it that we're going to do next day, next week, next month? And so, I mean, this is my point, is otherwise frustration is going to set in very fast. We saw what happened with the Yahapalana, the broken promises, and people got very angry. We have a particular moment now to start thinking about what are the reforms we need to push immediately, and not just saying Gota go home or Rajapaksas go home, but what are the systems we want to put in place? What are the structures? But this is also an important thing. It's a political thing we need to talk about. But I want to raise this point. The economic crisis, the pandemic, has also raised the issue of the most vulnerable population. Now, while we talk about political change and culture, all of that, what are those systems that are going to be also introduced so that everyone's needs are going to be addressed too? So what are those social security nets, for example, systems that are going to be in place that people feel their needs are also addressed?
Right. I have a question for Deepika, but I'll just quickly pick Christopher Stefan's brain. Christopher, am I right with your surname, Stefan?
Stephen.
Stefan, right?
It's Stephen.
Stephen. So Christopher Stephen. Sorry, Christopher, for getting your name wrong. I profuse to apologize to you for that. Christopher, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, please. So
Sure.
we all know what you do. A line or two.
I'm in construction, and that's my. I'm in building construction. That's my background.
My God, Christopher, you must be having a time finding cement for construction work. How much is a pack of cement now?
Last week 1,950. Today it's 2,450.
So do you think, Christopher, do you think the construction industry will come to a standstill because of these issues that are plaguing the country at the moment?
Sorry, say that again, please.
Do you think the construction industry will come to a grinding halt because of the current economic situation that we are facing at the moment?
Of course. I mean, at the rate we are going, already, even prior to all of this, it was very difficult for an average Sri Lankan to build a house.
Christopher, Christopher, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Right, okay. There's some sort of disturbance from your end with regard to the mic, I believe. But okay. So Christopher, while you were wearing the mask, we couldn't recognize you. You are one of the people who said in Newsline that the 225+1 should get out and that you would stay in Sri Lanka. What made you say such a statement? Was it due to anger?
And frustration. I mean, throughout this program, I mean, many of us are talking about the 225. But if I may add, I mean, if I may make any contribution to this program,
right.
I just like to that it should be read as, or it should be stated as 225+1, because the accountability starts from the main person itself, the president. You can't have the president addressing the nation and saying this is not a predicament that I was responsible for. So I think it should be 225+1. That's what I've been saying from some time ago.
Yeah, but Christopher, you heard Rajiv, Bhavani, Dr. Deepika, as well as Nishan speaking about the situation right now. If we are to move towards an impeachment of the president or a parliamentary snap election, we have to resort to a constitutional mechanism. Are you for that as a member of the public, or do you want to call elections immediately and want to see a change? Because Rajiv said change cannot be instilled overnight.
Shamil, but what we want as a silent protesters, what we've been campaigning for from the start is not to topple governments. Let's be very clear. We're not trying here to topple governments. I mean, we understand that this government has been elected. But what we want them to know 2.5 years later into this dismal performance of this government is that let them know that we are watching. We are not going to silently wait for their term to end in 5 years and then make a decision. We want them to know that we are watching from the president onwards. We also want the opposition to know that we are watching. If they think that they can stay quiet while this country keeps going down a slippery slope and wait for their turn so that power falls into their lap, they're sadly mistaken.
Right, thanks. Thank you very much, Christopher. Nishan, when you hear individuals like Christopher speak, when you hear individuals like Angelo, Trehan, Menaka speak, they are not individuals who are from the vulnerable communities in Sri Lanka. They are in the middle class. Probably even they can afford, and you are also a celebrated lawyer, Nishan. You can definitely fetch for yourself, and you won't be that battered with the economic hardships faced by the country at the moment. But individuals like you are coming to the forefront now. What is the reason behind this? Is it because even the people with some money in their hands are also agitated with the current state of affairs?
Definitely, Shamir. Now, I think over the last month, all of us would have been about 35% poorer compared to where we were in the context of the entire world. Then Christopher was talking about the construction industry. Now, I think when I came about a year ago on a program, I was talking about corruption and how I was trying
to make your house.
Yeah. So now I am endeavoring, I'm in the process. So my contractor contracted with me about 6 months ago, and the cement 50 kg bag was about $900. Now today I've like got performance guarantees and a contract sum stipulated, but he's crying. He can't fetch the cement, number one. Number two, he wants me to also contribute for the increase in the cement price, and I know for a fact that I need to do that. It is
your contract is like President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, no action, 1.5 years, nothing else.
No, only 6 months, my dear. No. 1.5 years went to get the plan approved. I didn't. So, contractor, with all due respect, that gentleman is doing a reasonable job, and I'm pushing him, and things are happening. But now we are at a standstill, and the construction industry is suffering. And now we have budgeted for a house at a certain sum of money, and now we are looking at about 35-40% spending, more spending money for that. And then the ultimate question is, would it actually have value?
Nishan, now we saw the tea industry suffering as a result of the crisis with regard to fertilizer. Roshan Rajdure, who is the Plant Association spokesperson, says that buyers will now source their teas from elsewhere, with the continuous supply of qualities is not available from Sri Lanka. Now, this is one of the major problems facing the export agricultural product of the country, which is tea. Now, who should be held accountable for a situation like that? Is it the former Minister of Agriculture who should be held accountable? If that is the case, can an FR petition be filed against an individual like that, of that sort, to make sure there's accountability? Or is it someone else who should be held accountable? Is it the Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture who is responsible for Sri Lanka losing so much of foreign reserves, foreign revenue? Who should be held accountable?
Well, if it's a question of foreign revenue and ultimately whether we can file an FR petition now, which seemingly after a considerable period of time, we have a duration in the Constitution, 28 days or 30 days, we have to invoke our right there. But then accountability, unfortunately, now the central bank governor came up with a roadmap, 6-month roadmap in October, canvassed the benefits of fixing the dollar at 202, talked about influx of significant foreign remittances into our country, and then in March we are floating the dollar, and the dollar has hit 300. Nobody is accountable. Now that is the part which we are unfortunately we do not have any accountability in any way or manner.
Nishan, so, now several months ago, the Pandora Papers, remember? They highlighted 2 individuals, again attached to the Rajapaksa family, unfortunately. Now, no investigations. There was a committee appointed by the president to look into this. Committees after committees have been appointed, unfortunately, in Sri Lanka over and over again. Now there's a new committee appointed by the president to instruct him on the IMF. At least that committee individuals, they are intellectuals and who can advise the president on matters of that sort. But committees were appointed to even look at the Pandora Papers, but where are the results?
That's the thing. So that is the issue. People are wanting results. People are upset. We are all distraught. We are all feeling the pinch or the crunch. And we have come to a situation where we have all got desperate. People are on the streets. People want some degree of change. And whether it has to be with a drastic change of the entire government going home, or whether the compromise and a coalition government with some form of consensus with the opposition, that's a matter which has to be decided politically. But people are obviously disgruntled because we do not have the basic means at this time.
I'd like to direct a question to Rajiv Amarasuriya. Now, there is mass opposition against the government here in Sri Lanka, and that's a fact. However, what these protesters are expecting is a little bit ambiguous, because they chant one thing, but what they're asking for the government to go home, for the president to go home, is not really a realistic option right now. I hope you'd agree with me on that. So as far as how Sri Lanka can move forward, because the people, from what they're saying, from the people who are protesting, they don't want the current administration in power. They don't want the current head of state in power. They don't want the current government in power. But we are in such a predicament where we can't hold an election. We can't change this. So what really are the options that are available, as far as if the leaders finally come to their senses and think in the best interest of the country, what kind of options are we looking at? What might happen? Best case scenario.
Yes, this is a real people's movement. This is not based on any political group pushing this. So this is the feelings of the people which is coming out. You have a set of rulers who have mismanaged, got us into this situation. We have power cuts, electricity, gas, fuel, everything is in short supply. So you're angry. And so the immediate reaction is we want all of them out. So you can't expect, I mean, those are feelings which are coming from inside. You won't otherwise have, you know, protesters at this time at different places coming out like that. And so there's anger, there's frustration, and that is justified. And so you can't expect them to articulate how they want it done, but this is the problem they have. So now we need to try to work out how we can move this into real change. What the protesters have so far achieved is that the government has realized this is a serious issue. I don't think anyone expected the government ministers to resign, all this to happen over the weekend. Of course, I must also say the government is also to blame. I mean, they impose emergency when they should not have. Social media censorship which was not required. So the government, after all the fertilizer and all that, then they also escalated this situation. Maybe a reasonable, practical, intelligent government would have managed this, and it would have been a Sunday protest, and it would have ended, and then we would have still, gone on. So they brought this upon themselves, and that is their fault on one side. So having said that, now that we are in this situation, the government has now, basically fallen apart. They are opened up to the opposition, the others to form. I think, as I said before, we need to find the immediate way out of this predicament. Probably now the only option is going to the IMF. Now on that also, I think Nishan also said about the IMF, one must go a little back. The government, especially the finance minister, the governor of the central bank, they consistently said, we are not going to the IMF. We have other plans, but those plans were never presented. I think even the BASL called upon in January when we issued a statement, it was under my signature. We called upon the government to let us know. We didn't say to go to the IMF, but let us know from where. And maybe there's another IMF which we don't know of. But I say that I think the government, lot of the main players in the government were outright arrogant. You can listen to advice, but they just decided, well, we are not going to the IMF, we are going to find it from somewhere else.
But Rajaram Rusuri, speaking of these decisions of the government, even recently, right after the Merihana protests, we saw Minister Prasanna Ranatunga, many other ministers of the government coming out and saying these were acts of extremists. We have video footage of how organized they were. There was a press release from the President's media division saying that they came with weapons, with swords, with poles, but there was no evidence presented to support their claims. Similarly, because of these statements that they made, because of the positions that they told the people, which they completely flouted right after, people think that they are liable for the situation that we're in, almost criminally negligent for the situation that we're in. Take, for example, the governor of the central bank. He said we are not in a crisis. He said we don't have to go to the IMF. He said investors have confidence in us. We went and paid back an ISB of 500 million in January with an assurance from him that there won't be a shortage, that there won't be a crisis, or the crisis wouldn't further aggravate. And today we're standing here with no paper to print our ballots. So is there any way, the people are also wondering, is there any way to prevent these individuals who made these decisions, who made these statements, you know, come out and answer for them and not flee the country like we've seen happen so many countless times in the past. I mean, even the governor of the central bank during the central bank bond scam, he fled the country. He's having his fun.
Yeah, I think we need to work out as to how that can be done. Just before I come there, I think what has happened is that all these politicians, all those in both sides, have been very successful at what they do. But if you look at some of these politicians, they've been there in office in parliament on either side for 25-30 years. So they have been successful in securing their position over and over again. Now, I don't think any of them expected the public outcry which erupted in the last month in this, and I think all of them have been taken by surprise. Now, this is anger, frustration directed not only at the government, I mean, more at the government, but also at the opposition. Because Yahapalanya, when they came in, there was so much expectation, but they failed the country miserably. So in that context, I think they are also, I think, in disarray. So maybe the opposition also is not sure of, you know, coming into this situation. Probably it's a state of flux, and I don't think anyone can really or predict as to what will happen tomorrow, day after, the next week. But things are very volatile. So now, coming back to your question, how does one hold them accountable? It is easier said than done. But I think now that the public, a lot of these politicians also, their only profession or vocation is politics. So their ultimate end game also is to find a way to come back. Now we talk about replacing, I think somebody, Christopher said 225 plus 1. That is what we are talking about. Or majority of them, or all of them, their end game is to come back in 2.5 years' time with a new promise, with a new whatever front, and come back into the same position. And so, keeping that in mind, there is nothing else they can do. This one. So, keeping that in mind, we have a hold on them, at least the ones in this 225. So, we need to now have mechanisms of holding them accountable as to what they have done before, and also what they will do in this next year, 2 years. So, there is a huge responsibility. Now, we are just at the beginning of this change. The people, I say, must be the protesters, all of us, the professionals, the business person, entrepreneurs, must get stronger.
How so? When you say stronger, what does that mean?
Now, see, Shamir, now we are openly discussing this here at this interview. 1 year ago, you would have had probably your network didn't mention the president's name. I've seen situations where you black it out. So now people are openly mentioning names. People are making allegations. There are hashtags. So now the situation has changed. So this pressure,
just to correct you there, Rajiv, if you don't mind, please. But it's 1 year ago, or when we were burned to the ground in 2009, we've never backed down.
Let me rephrase, but maybe other networks. But Shamir, you mentioned that there's a fear psychosis, and that's a fact.
Yeah,
so that has changed. So what we need to do as, I think, a society is this pressure. That is what is key. Now, my fear is that once the electricity is provided again and there are no power cuts, there is fuel and there is gas, people will forget about all this and go back to their whatever they do. So we need to find a way, maybe as leaders of society, we need to ensure that this pressure is mounted on these politicians. Pressure is kept. The media must do that, we must do that, all of us, to ensure that this will not change. And as I said, that change must be brought to the next election.
So, Deepika, now interesting thoughts by Rajiv with regard to all this. You know, we have to keep on the pressure, and then you are saying that you have to be very civic in what you do. It has to be done democratically, and then you all said we've come to the boiling point now. People have really got fed up. Now, what must the people do? Now, what's the next step?
Well, I mean, this is not going to end here. It should be a continuum. I mean, at this moment, I think the achievement is that people have found voice and also the power of citizenship. I think we've been very passive for a very long period of time. As Rajiv said, it's very quiet. Generally, we tolerate a lot. We are a very, I would say, quite a passive lot, especially the urban middle class, which should be steering a democracy, really. We've been a very passive lot. But so now, there's a sense that when we come together, when people come together, there is power in that there's a power of change. Now, these are things that are, happening constantly in more entrenched democracies. So, I think if we can keep this going, because as they say, the price of liberty is constant vigilance. So, we have to keep going. The civic organizations must come together. It's not, as this friend said, toppling governments at, at every possible point when we are not happy with the government. But it's keeping the pressure on professionals working together, professional bodies working together, maybe the bar association working with, let's say what is it called, the Organization of Professionals Association, other like academic bodies, etc. Keep the pressure going. And also, I think it's a major mistake just to focus on the short term. At the moment, what are the solutions? How are we going to manage this? So according to the constitutional provisions, what are we going to do? Yes, we have to focus on it. But unless we use this sort of a unique moment in our political history to forge something long-lasting and create a new political culture, these sound like big words. But we need this. We need to look at citizenship, civic consciousness, governance in a new way, where we participate in everything, not just elections, decision making. We go knocking on doors. We need town meetings constantly with our MPs, with our ministers. Let them come and talk to us. So I think we've got to start thinking, in the long run as well, not just right now. Is the president going to resign? What's going to happen?
No, but
while
right
thinking
now,
about that, we have to think. So for that, I think we need to think of the structures. I mean, again, this sounds like theoretical, it's boring, but without structures, you don't have accountable governance. Somebody mentioned, there are no indictments, no prosecutions. People who commit offenses or who are suspected of committing offenses just slip through, and there's no action. That's because of institutional weaknesses. So what do we do to strengthen those institutions? And that has to be thought of in the long term.
Yeah.
But I must say, for democratic governance, it's not about who gets elected eventually and whether they are wonderful people, but it's about how active the citizenry is.
Yeah, but Deepika, right now it's not about thinking about long term. Why? Because most of the people that we speak to say that they want an immediate solution, because if we prolong with the same government or the governance structure in place, we might not even have a future.
No, that is very true. In the short term, we need to find a solution to this.
But that solution has to come immediately, don't you think so?
Yeah, I think it has to come, but I think it's also not about, now look at the Arab Spring. There was all that excitement about, change and people taking to the streets. It was also very spontaneous, but in the end, some of the countries really floundered because, they really couldn't sustain that, and there was no way in which governance could be managed well. So I think we need to be very thoughtful about this. We need to go according to the constitution. We need to challenge.
But
for example,
when we look at
can I just come up with one point, Shamir?
Yeah.
Now, for example, we should insist, in my opinion, that one of the preconditions for anything is that the 20th Amendment should go. We must challenge. Now, all governments are very pleased to say that they have 2/3 majority, any government, and they clobber it together by hook or by crook. And always 2/3 majorities have been used against people. So I think now we've got to challenge Parliament and say, now you come together again, and now you reverse the 20th Amendment and enact something like the 19th Amendment or something even better that will make government accountable. So I think we need to look at those things as well. It's not about whether A will go, B will come in, and everything will be fine. I do agree that some, there should be a solution at the moment, but it's going to be short term. Again, as Rajiv said, when the electricity comes, when the power comes, when the fuel comes, when the gas comes and everything is all right, we forget.
Right. So Bhavani, do you agree with that? Do you think all this short term, or do you think this time around people have really got fed up and they will wait and make sure that they exert pressure to a point where there is some considerable change in the country?
I think it's a combination. So I think majority it's the short term, and granted for them it's addressing the immediate needs. I mean, can they get medicine? Can they get food? Can they get gas? Can their vehicles run? Those are the more immediate needs. But there is something that has been unleashed in the last few weeks where you're seeing large younger people coming out to the streets, but also different age groups, but younger generation saying, this is, don't rob us of our future. That's quite unique in that they are not sitting back and saying, okay, we'll take what the political elite is going to say, we're going to let the government run. So I think this is it's a different thing to what we've seen in the past. Yahapalanya, 2014, 2015, we saw a lot of people coming out, pushing, and then saw the frustration as well. There is something different here. But let me put something to you all as well. It's not just waiting for the citizenry to push and keep pressure. And you've been doing this. I think it's very important for the media also to keep pressure, keep attention, ask questions, be responsible in also putting out information, because you also see misinformation, fake news, different narratives being pushed out. So there's a role and responsibility for everyone. It's not just the elected members of parliament. It's for professionals as well. Ask the question, what about the private sector? Where is the business community? There's a whole surge in 2019, 2020 to help this government to pass particular things. What are they doing now? They brought this government to office. What is their role? What is their game plan now? So I think for every sector, every community, every age group, there is a role. We all have to be responsible in doing that. But we keep saying this, it's the immediate that needs a lot of attention, but what next? What happens after? Before the frustration sets in, let's have at least 10 basic fundamental points that we can come up with. Abolishing the executive presidency could be one of them, but there are a whole host of things. Addressing corruption, political accountability in different forms, transparency. Right. The list is long, right, but media also has a very, very particular role.
Well, because you mentioned media, Bhavani, I must say I've been a journalist for the last 18 years with Newsfirst, and I'm extremely proud of these moments that we are staying with the people steadfastly, no matter what, despite any pressures that we get. And I think I, along with Shalan and Shehan, who started off their careers at Newsfirst, would take much pride to say that we are always standing with the people. So I just want to quickly move on to our Zoom guests, Christopher, Menaka, Trehan and Angelo. Are you all four there? Or I can see Christopher online. Menaka,
yeah, right here.
Trehan and Angelo.
Right here.
Before we wrap up the show tonight, Angelo, Trehan, Menaka and Christopher. Let's start off with Angelo first, then move on to Trehan, Menaka and Christopher. What is the message you have now for the government and the people who are protesting? Again, Angelo, Trehan, Menaka and Christopher, don't try to persuade the public to do the wrong thing, but what is the message you have for them as well as the government in power now? Very quickly, I'll give you 30 seconds each.
Okay, I mean, if it is for the people who are protesting, protests must continue to be peaceful. We started these protests as silent, peaceful protests. They are inspired, they've inspired a few other ways of letting this anger spill onto the streets, but they need to continue to be peaceful if they are to be taken seriously. To the government, accountability has to be a guarantee. It cannot be this elusive search. It has to be a guarantee that you need to give people, and you need to give it to the people very, very quickly if you want to bring at least some sort of sense of calm to society.
Trehan?
Yes, Shamil. I have 10 points that I would like to run through in the quick time.
Very quickly, Trehan, very quickly.
Maybe one question.
When we say 10 points, details went down my spine as well.
One is to the government, we cannot remain a feudal state, right? So change the political system to what suits Sri Lanka. That brings me to my question, what's the ideal model? Maybe the panel can answer that. Was the public emergency legal? Social media blockage and the 24-hour curfew legal? That's my second question. My third point, new constitution should be made by the interim government, ideally before 2024. Executive presidency must be abolished, at least by now. It has been supposed to be abolished since in the 90s. Sri Lanka is a republic, so the sovereignty lies with the people. The younger generation, my message to the younger generation is to have a better understanding of the constitution. Okay, and probably they will by now. Also, we need to make sure that we have investor confidence return to Sri Lanka. And people don't know how the constitution represents them as a republic. So they need a better understanding, that is the general public. And finally, the general public need more insight on the constitution and how to fight illegal acts done by respective governments.
Right. Thanks a lot, Trehan. Menaka? Very quickly. I don't think we have Menaka online, but Christopher, yes, we have Menaka, yes. Menaka, very quickly. I can't hear you, Menaka, sorry. No, not yet. Can you say something, Menaka? No, we can't hear you yet. No, something is wrong with Menaka's audio.
Come back to her.
We'll get back to you, Menaka, momentarily, but Christopher, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Right. Parting thoughts.
I'll repeat on what Angelo said about accountability. I think majority of us think accountability, both in the government and the opposition, is important. I'd like, if I may say something about voting us and how we vote. I think we need to look at the educational qualifications of people we vote for. We need to think about their age. Do you really want people who should be, even in home for the elders, looking after their grandchildren? Should they be running our country and deciding our future? We have seen certain politicians, I'm not mentioning names here, who need to be helped up by 3 or 4 people to stand. Are these the people who are going to rule us? Don't we have suitable people in this country?
Right. Thank you very much.
So I think we can do those things. All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christopher. Menaka, are you there? Very quickly before I go in for a short.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Menaka. Very quickly.
Okay. So sorry about that. So just very quickly to the people, I would want to say keep protesting, but again advocating what Angelo said as well. Be peaceful, right? Be level-headed. It is important more than ever to remain calm and stay focused on the long game. This is not about sending one person home, because the easiest thing for the president to do would be to be sent home without any accountability, right? We need to hold all of them accountable. So stay focused on the long game. In terms of the leadership and the government, you need to act fast. You need to act fast. You need to answer the people. You need to face the nation. You are displaying incredible arrogance right now by not even acknowledging what the people are trying to say to you. So we need accountability immediately. We cannot reshuffle the same people who have got us into this mess. So these reshufflings are really not going to sort of fool us, right? And I would also just want to add to all the other professions that are out there, including the legal profession, medical profession, all of the professional sections. You all need to step up and support the public more. right? We as citizens, as the middle class, we have been fighting this battle for a long time. We have been trying to make ourselves heard for a long time. It's great to see you all stepping up now, but you all need to work with the citizenry more. It is not just on us. We have to work together.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Menaka. Just because Bhavani mentioned about corporates not coming to the forefront as yet, I want to mention that one of the leading apparel exporters in Sri Lanka had issued a statement stating that as a responsible corporate citizen, the company is deeply concerned by the recent events upholding Sri Lanka. We stand by and respect our citizens and our team's right to participate in peaceful protests and to express themselves freely. It is a collective responsibility of all leaders, political, social and business, to urgently address the current crisis, prevent confusion and chaos and rebuild Sri Lanka's economic stability. So there are corporates that are coming forward now, Bhavani, because right now it's important that everyone unites to make sure that we come out from this mess collectively. So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's a final round. We are in discussion with Rajiv, Bhavani, Deepika as well as Nishan. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
COVID-19 සඳහා ආරක්ෂිත පියවර නිතරම හොඳින් සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න. සබන් හෝ විසබීජ නාශක මධ්‍යසාරයක් භාවිතා කර දෑත් පිරිසිදු කරන්න. සෑම විටම අන් අය සමග මීටරයක දුරස්ථභාවයක් පවත්වා ගන්න. හැකි සෑම විටම නිවසේ රැඳී සිටින්න. නිරතුරුවම නිවැරදිව මුඛාවරණ පළඳින්න.
The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world.
Don't be daunted by it, as daunting as it seems that, there are barriers.
As we all do our part to break the bias in celebration of the International Women's Day.
If we respect, I think we will get respect back.
Their thinking is revolutionary, but is your bias blocking you from listening to them?
Public relations is a huge market in India. It's a huge market in Singapore.
Women form over 50% of the Sri Lankan population and over 60% of our total graduates.
Whatever is given to you, learn everything, get your education and thrive.
Join me in Biznomics as we bring to you 8 episodes featuring trailblazing women in their chosen industries. Biznomics, every Saturday and Sunday at 5 p.m.
This is Face the Nation. We are in the final round. We start off the final round with Dr. Deepika Udagama, former chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. What is the way forward?
Well, I think as everybody accepts, this is a very unique moment. It's a unique moment because, as we have been discussing, citizens have found their voice. Listening to fellow citizens, one feels very proud. This is not about a particular government. Governments come and go, but the point is, when a government is floundering, is not addressing the concerns of the people, when people, take up matters into